Well, I guess we're live. How about that? All right. Well, Jack's not yet with us. In fact, he was just recently broadcasting, so we'll see if we got everything squared away. Let's make sure our signals are going as they should. Let's see here. I know this got posted a little bit late, so we'll see what's up here. Let me go ahead and get the comments. Okay, or not. So anybody give me a shout out if you're in here. Looks like we're in here. All right. Well, if let me make sure I hit this record button. Hang on. All right, I guess we're recording now. And judging by what I see there, we got about 6 in here. I can't remember how long it's been since we've gone live. Been quite a while. Hey, what's up, Colby, Cindy, Vicky? Hey, there you go, Vicky. Fat Sagger. Here, pimp, sir. Cindy Looney. All right. Well, like I said, I may have to do this solo. I'm not sure because, like I said, Jack was just broadcasting, so I'm not sure if we got our signals crossed or whether he's going to make it or not, or what the deal is. But he's a busy guy, and he's been talking a lot about biochar since I make a whole lot of bone sauce and everything out there. At least I try to. It's been really tough as of late to be able to do that. It only makes good sense if I can stack functions. That's a real deal permaculture gig, okay? Stacking functions. So, which means if I'm already going to be out there burning anyway, doesn't it make good sense to go ahead and try to go ahead and stack functions? Now, William has made, in fact, he's done this before exactly when we were trying to figure out how to make bone sauce. William, basically said, hey, if we're going to do this, let's go ahead and do some biochar. And we did. And to my understanding, it turned out pretty doggone well. And we did a number of things with it. So that's what Jack's on here, or what I'm waiting on him to come on here to do. And we're going to talk all things biochar. So let me go ahead and give a shout out to the folks that are in here. Quit. Okay. I didn't really expect so many so early. It's been quite a while since we've been live. Trash Can Bees. Bonnie Klein. Okay, from this distance, I thought it said Klein. Don't be a simp. Hit that like button straight from my man Jed over there. OPG Life. Yo, here we go all the way. Yeah, airborne. Isle of View Homestead. Billy, what's up, Pimp? And remember, for those that are easily offended, remember, Pimp stands for Permaculture is my passion. So it's a pretty, I think, a clever way to take something that some people feel like is a pejorative and turn it into something positive, especially when it's going to reach other people out there that look a little bit like me. Okay, so here we go. Lori. Okay, yeah, she's been around a while. Lori C. Yeah, I can't really make it out from here. Isle of View Homestead. How much wood, bro? Okay, we're getting all kinds of. How much does it take for a batch of sauce? Okay, I'll go ahead and field some of your questions till Jack gets on. Here's the thing: is that we have a lot of wood when we make bone sauce that requires a. Let me back up a little bit. So with wood that you can't do anything with, let's say it's not marketable. Let's say there's nothing you can do with it. Paul Wheaton has been a champion of basically taking that wood, burying it, and doing something of a hugel mound. And you can do that. And we've done that. We've done it numerous times. Or maybe you can take that wood and do what we do with it. And bone sauce is really the solution for a lot of that. So really all it is, for those that want to know, is it's bones, water, heat, and time. And really, the secret sauce to all this is really the recipe, and you can't walk away from it for a minute. I guess that's about all I'm going to say on bone sauce. It's really not a commercial. That's really not what we're here to do today. We're talking about biochar, or we'll talk about whatever you guys are into, because I love going live with y'all. So let's give another shout out to the other folks in here. Hopefully the comments don't pass me by. And if you would, y'all hit that like button. It tells everybody we're live. Greetings, everyone. Bobby, Razor JB. Let's get 100K. Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about that for a minute. All right, as far as that 100K, there's something of a little phenomenon going on right now. And if you doubt me, go check out Pinball Preparedness. Here's what I'm getting at. My man has been at 99.8 forever and a day. I mean, he was literally blasting up the charts. You look at his numbers, the guy gets thousands and thousands of people to check him out every single day. And then it kind of stretches any common sense for me to believe that he just stopped at 99.8. So if you don't already know who he is, go over there, check out Pinball Preparedness, get him over 100,000 because they're playing games. And when you talk about things the powers that shouldn't be don't want you to talk about, well, that's one way that they put the smack down on you. They elevate that pin pan and bam, unleash on you, and they try to keep you suppressed. And then they'll open up the floodgates a little bit, then they'll slow you back, or videos that you think are going to do good, and then they slow you back. You know, it's what it is. So I'm already seeing the same exact thing happen to us as we approach that 100,000. So the scales aren't exactly balanced. They're a little bit sleazy, and I think you know what time it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and go. I'm sorry, y'all. I am the least capable person on the planet to run these to run this sort of thing. So I'm just have to go through it. I know I missed some people here, but I have no idea how to even scroll this thing, y'all. I'm something of a Luddite. I can barely operate the phone I got in my pocket right now. Okay, does anyone know if propagating trees from cutting works better with the leaves cut or left on? Okay, typically when you're going to graft, you're going to remove those leaves. And you're going to leave about 3 buds at least on there. That's the way we like to do it. And then if you want, go ahead and spend a little bit of money and get yourself a grafting tool. It makes all the difference in the world. In fact, it makes this little omega shape, which I don't think I'm going to be able to draw right here. It makes a little bit of an omega shape where it fits perfectly, and the water and all the whatever sheds away from it. So, yeah, that's exactly how you want to do. That's how you want to roll with that. Do you think you guys can make a video at some point composting in arid conditions? I've been having the hardest time getting my compost to finish because it dries out no matter what I do. Okay, great question, Trash Can Bees. So I'll go ahead and cover some of that composting. For anybody that doesn't know, give me 1 second. For anybody that doesn't know, we're doing a series over on Patreon, not to be exclusive necessarily, but because we're showing you basically a new method of composting to us. And we're basically taking all of the knowledge we have with composting and combining it with what we've learned from Dr. Elaine Ingham. Okay. And it's turning out to be fantastic. And the reason why it's on Patreon as opposed to YouTube, number one, is to thank you for all the people out there that support us on Patreon. And like I said, you can support us for as little as $1 or up to 25, depending on what it is you want to do and your ability to give. So we've been going through this compost series, and I'm going to go ahead and address your question right quick. When you're in an arid environment, you're going to have to really, really, really play with your moisture in terms of a tarp. So when you're doing anything in terms of composting, it's going to have to be under a tarp 9 times out of 10, or you're going to lose a lot of that moisture. Or like where we are at 3,000 feet, we have the situation where it's dry up here as well. So things dry out. So when we do that chicken tractor on steroids, the amount of moisture that we stick into that thing is critical. The monitoring of the moisture is critical. Now, you want to be careful in some of the lower elevations or less arid places, because if you put too much water in your compost, if you get above 50%, which means you can squeeze it with one hand and get like a single drop out or in between your fingers. If you play with that too much, then it's going to restrict the airflow to get into that pile. So you want to find that happy spot. But in your case, in an arid environment, I'm going to seriously suggest that you cover that stuff up, and you might want to go a little bit higher on that moisture. That's going to be your biggest problem there. So make sure you get it absolutely cut up. So Wing Walker, what's up? Melody, Samantha Richardson, I got ant problems. Okay. Maybe I want you to think about that a little bit differently in terms of ant problems. Maybe your ants are functioning like your worms ordinarily would. And I got this idea from the great Stefan Subkowiak up in Canada. And, you know, a lot of us think, okay, man, we got this ant problem. Oh, shoot. You know, how maybe these are the guys that are actually doing the transfer down into your soil. You dig? maybe those ants are actually the ones that are doing that exchange. So if you have fire ants like we did all over Texas, maybe figure out the best way of working with them. Now it's going to be at the end of the day. Look, I know the devastation ant problems can be, okay, especially dealing with these guys. The thing you're going to have to do is try to figure out how best to work with them. Now, some people have said, I haven't tried this. One person told me, and it sounds like it would work. They basically took a shovel of one red ant pile and threw it into another pile and took a pile out of there and threw it in the other. He said they decimated each other. So, is that accurate? I don't know. But maybe try to figure out ways in which we work with them. Like all these other problems that people say they have, like multiflora rose. Do you really have a multiflora rose problem? Or do you have a lack of hair sheet problem? Because you could turn that nasty multiflora rose into something very delicious. Do you have a goldenrod problem, or do you have a lack of sheet problem? It's just a matter of your focus. And so these ants, you're never going to get rid of them unless you want to spray a bunch of toxic chemicals, and those never even work anyway. So you might want to go ahead and look for other ways of dealing with that. All right, so let's see here. Let me go. Oh, it looks like I can actually turn down a little bit. William just rolled up in here.
Yeah, I can fill in until Jack shows up.
All right, so he's going to help me out here, y'all. He's going to fill in until Jack shows up. Maybe he can work some of this tech too. Hey, y'all, if you're just getting in here, please hit that thumbs up. Tells everybody we're live. Samantha, Deep South Alabama. That's what I'm talking about. Mama Bear, howdy, Billy Pimp Farmer. Shoot, I'm blessed to have a carrot, let alone grafting. Grafting. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can dig it. It says graphing on here. I'm like, okay. Oh, dude, you're a legend.
Switch me spots.
Well, okay. Hey, y'all, bear with us 1 second. William's going to change me spots here. So you didn't think your old man can handle this?
Well, I figured I'd fill in until Jack came on.
All right.
Dang, Dad, this chair's all hot.
Yeah. I'm as hot as a runaway slave up in this room right now.
You gonna hit the fan?
Yeah, hang loose.
Yeah, he left this chair all sweaty. It's all sweaty in the back.
Hey, y'all, if you don't know about it, that sign in the back basically is our podcast. So check us out over there on the Permaculture PIMPcast.
I don't know what's going on out there. I think a cat got in the house, the way everybody's reacting out there. I guess you can't hear it.
Was that somebody yelling?
I don't know. Where did you leave off at? I got one from Generic Fabric Refresher. Hey, Perma Pimps, do you plant herbs to deflect bug attention?
Yeah,
we used to.
Well, we son, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we actually do, but it's part of our guild. Our guild, if you don't know, is basically a collection of plants that surround themselves around let's say a tree, okay? And those plants do a whole lot of different things. And part of the benefit of having a guild, part of the benefit of having that guild is that it does kind of, deal with some of the problem pests. But
well, yeah, I don't know anymore.
Well, I do know is that at the end of the day, you don't have a pest problem.
Yeah.
You have a soil problem. I mean, that really is what we've been saying forever and a day. And now it's just being more and more confirmed with the education that we're getting.
Well, it makes me think if like those plants are even doing anything at all, like as far as deterring pests.
No, they actually do, because those plants are taking all their exudates. Each one of those plants has a different set of, when I say exudates, basically the things that come out of them. Like in the human body, that would be if you sneeze, the stuff on your hands or anything that comes out of your body. I knew a guy named Trevor once had something fall out of his ear when we were sitting down to dinner. Man, it was the most disgusting moment of my life. That's another story.
All right.
Eating these burgers that he made, and then something falls out of his ear. Well, that's an exudate. Well, going back to the plants. Every one of these plants are providing exudates to the bacteria and the fungi down in the soil. And I'm going to simplify this very simply, but essentially that bacteria and fungi go out with a shopping list. They come back and get that plant something it needs. Well, every plant, it's going to be a little bit different. Those plants are putting down sugars, a little bit of protein, a little bit of this and that.
And depending on what they're needing, right?
Right.
I'm in the beginning of the course. Dad and mom, well, mom is I don't know if she's done or
she's
not.
further along than all of us, but all it's doing is really confirming and giving me a better understanding as to what's really happening as things go on. So anyway, with each one of these plants that exudates, or the sugars and the other things that it puts down in the soil, is going to be a little bit different. So that's really a good thing to have.
Got one from Ann in Texas. How can I use or eliminate Johnson grass? I mean, you can fix a lot of those with, again, the soil. How, I don't know yet. I mean, I'm still trying to
some
learn
you do
that
know.
part.
Use the permaculture knowledge you already have, but you're already good on a lot of this stuff, and it comes right back to soil, because right now his brain is in something of a quandary, because you're now getting understanding of the things you already knew, but now you're understanding the reasons why.
Right.
Now, regarding anything you don't want, hang on. Yeah, that's Jack.
Oh, well, I got another question.
Well, no, hang on a sec. As far as anything you don't want, first of all, if let's say it's in a pasture, well, your bacterial and fungal ratio, you want it to be about 50%. But most pastures and most lawns and most everything else is typically bacterial dominated. So maybe to get rid of that Johnson grass, or maybe to get rid of, like in our area, that silver grass, we know that if we move it from a bacterial system into a fungal system, if we can make that transition and get it from a bacterial to a fungal system, or equalize it, then guess what? It can't find a home here. In fact, we did a video not long ago where we're showing right up against the fence, where that stuff, your mom had she is a freaking genius. She had long suspected that, if we just kick it over in the fungal, well, now we're getting confirmation on that. So we're just finding out with this soil science that we're learning, y'all, it is taking our understanding on a whole nother level. Jack's going to be here in about 5 minutes, y'all, so we're just going to drive on.
Got one from Lori Seberg. Question. I'm reading Gaia's Garden based on your suggestion. It's wonderful, but I'm wondering why you've chosen to do compost instead of focusing more on mulching or sheet mulching as the author prefers.
Well, because we use a great number of things. When we take these dogs to the hunt, y'all, we use, for example, in our food forest.
Well, hold on. We do all three.
Well,
we do the compost, the mulch, and the sheet mulch.
Right. We do it all.
Yeah.
We do every bit of that. But I want you to know that because we've been at this for so long, we don't just take one dog to the hunt. We find the best elements, like in our food forest and all the other things out there. We find the best elements of everything. And we cut and paste, for example, like from Subkoviak, Stefan Subkoviak, absolute genius. So we take a lot of what he has, but we eliminate the plastic. Okay. Mark Shepard has the STUN method, which stands for strategic, total, utter neglect. Well, we take that and we use it in the beginning. Well, we actually use it in the end, and we take that method also. Elaine Ingham, what we're learning from her, we've been applying, but now we know the reasons why we do what we do, and we're learning how to make it even better. So if you think what we were doing before was decent, y'all, I think your mind's going to be blown what you find out. And then what we talk about with Jack today, it's one more element. So yes, we use everything you see in Gaia's Garden, at least the parts that make sense to us and what we're doing. But we also do away with the things that aren't necessarily. So we do everything you described there. We do all of it, unless I'm mistaken.
And mention again, Dusty and Chelsea, you had a question. Mention again where we're taking these classes, because they were wanting to know. They just joined in.
Yeah. So the classes we're doing, and they're not cheap, y'all. I mean, this is stuff you got to save for. It's the Soil Food Web course from Dr. Elaine Ingham. She has foundation courses, which I've already been through. Michelle's already been through, and she's in the microscopy course. I've been through that. And now Michelle's on to the next phase. I'm waiting on my microscope to get on to the next phase. And William is just in the beginning parts of it.
Yep.
Now, he's having the same problem right now getting into this that I did, because you have something of it's hard to quantify this. So all of this stuff let me just say it a different way. Masanobu Fukuoka knew all the answers way back when. Okay.
Yeah.
And what she is doing has done is basically confirmed under a microscope what he already knew.
Yeah. It's giving you here are the microorganisms that are responsible for what you thought was going on.
And it's not that difficult, y'all. I mean, when you realize how simple and easy this stuff is, now, as far as that course, it's going to cost you about 5 G's unless you can get it on sale. So it's not cheap. But if this is your career, if this is your life, if permaculture is your passion, as it is ours, then I feel it my responsibility to spend. I mean, like I said, y'all, we don't drive new cars. We don't drive new trucks. We don't drive anything new. We have to sacrifice.
I just got done replacing a battery and an alternator in that old car.
And then how much was that battery, by the way?
Oh, yeah, that battery was $180 something. That was with the core charge. So that was after the core charge got, exchanged. And then the alternator was like almost $200 too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for breaking that on me.
Yeah. Remanufactured too.
Get out of town.
It's the only one they had.
Yeah. So everybody out there knows the case we're in, that everybody's in. So this is exactly why we're going to be talking to people like the pimp daddy of preparedness himself, Jack Spirko, and a number of others out there like Greg Judy. We are taking all of this stuff and hopefully distilling it down into what I want to call a unified field theory, which is kind of what we have going out there in our food forests and our orchards. It almost sounds arrogant, but I don't know how else to call it. It's basically a unified field theory of all the best elements that we've learned from everybody that we've either learned from or worked with or whatever the case may be. So, what else you got there, son?
Hatfield Homestead says, I have an opportunity to take an accelerated PDC for $900. 3 weekends in July. We are just starting out. Is it buying the cart before the horse?
Well, yes, I'll tell you, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
I might have some inside information on this.
Well, no, I'm saying as far as doing a PDC, before you put foot to butt on your property, one of the biggest problems people make is they get started in a PDC. They get into chapter 1, chapter 2. It seems boring because you don't get into the exciting stuff until about chapter 3. And so they drop out and then make all of these colossal mistakes that they could have absolutely avoided if they had taken the time to get a PDC.
If they had taken the time to get a PDC from like the correct person. Yeah. Just make sure you're going to the right location. I mean, I'm not going to like out the place on air, but make sure you're going to the right location whenever you're doing a PDC. Like check out the reviews. If there's whole YouTube channels dedicating bad reviews to this place, then that should be a sign.
Or it shouldn't be unreasonable to say, hey, do you have a list of some of your students I can talk to?
Oh, hey, Jack's here.
All right. Well, go ahead and add him to the stream.
All right. There you are.
Okay. Yeah, there's the pimp daddy of permaculture himself. No, he's the pimp daddy of preparedness. He was talking to the pimp daddy of permaculture the other day. We're going to switch seats here in a minute.
Yeah, can we hear you, Jack? Before I leave,
I'm pretty sure you can.
Oh, we can't hear Jack.
Let's work on the sound.
What about now?
I don't know. Can you?
Yes.
Yep, there we go.
Hey, Jack, give me a second here.
All right.
You need these.
Must be the audio engineer.
All right, y'all. So everybody's already locked stop. We had to warm up the crowd before the pimp daddy of preparedness got on here. My friend, my mentor, my homeboy, my brother from a Pennsylvania mother, because we kind of grew up in the same place, had the same kind of life. Y'all, this is the guy that introduced me. Let me fix this microphone a little bit. Right here, y'all. If you're not listening to the Survival Podcast, you're screwed up, and especially for these times. There's not a single wasted second in any broadcast he ever does. He's probably, in my opinion, the best at podcasting, regardless of the genre. Extraordinary teacher. I've had the pleasure of being able to work with him. He, without a second's prepared or anything, went out there, taught a class, and knocked it out of the park by everybody's estimation. A hero of mine in this space, y'all, and a guy that's taught me more than 20 masters permaculture designers put together, and I mean that. We're talking to the man, the myth, the legend himself, the pimp daddy of preparedness, Jack Spirko. How you doing, my man?
I'm great, man. Apparently I can do everything except show up on time.
No,
I apologize for the delay. I thought we were at 4, and I'm the one that set the time, so it's all on me.
No, it's all good, bro. I mean, nobody here is bored. Believe me, man. We had to go live. Nobody's ever bored when we're in here. In fact, I can't remember the last time I went live, and I think the last time was with you. So I know you just got finished broadcasting. I know because I was listening to it.
Okay.
So, folks, we won't be on here forever and a day. It's just, I know Jack's got to be tuckered out, but honestly, he always brings it every single time he's on anybody's program. And I was basically in the beginning, y'all, talking about, we were talking in the beginning about taking the right dog to the hunt and all the different influences that we have used in all the things we do out here, whether it's a food forest, whether it's an orchard, whether it's a garden. There's not one single influence in any of that thing. You name the system, and I can give you at least 10 people out there that we're influenced by and that dog that we take to the hunt. Now, with that said, Jack texted me a while back about a number of things, and I had the great pleasure of being able to talk to him about it, and it was concerning biochar and its role in pretty much everything. And he was basically saying to me, dude, you're already out there making bone sauce. Well, what's the process on that? Well, I'm starting a fire anyway every single time I do bone sauce. So I'd be a dope to not go ahead, because what do we do in permaculture? We stack functions. So if I got a fire going, it only made good sense to go out here and do some biochar. So Jack's going to give us the 411 on some biochar. And I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Pimp Daddy of Preparedness. Why don't you go ahead and take it away, my man?
All right. Well, that's not really a question, but we'll roll with it, right?
Yeah.
So biochar, let's just start off with what biochar is, right? And how that's different from what we think of as charcoal. So biochar is any organic matter, generally wood or something like that, that has been through what's called a process called pyrolysis, which is it's roasted at high temperatures in low to no oxygen environments. So it causes, in this case, wood to actually force the gases out of the wood, and those gases burn, but the wood remains. So what you're left with is about 30% of your total weight, assuming you started with, good dry wood to begin with. And it's just basically the carbon skeleton of the wood. And what makes it far different than anything you would buy at a store for your barbecue grill that you probably use this weekend is that it is fully and totally carbonized. Meaning there's not really anything left but carbon. If you take well-made biochar into your hands and play with it a little bit, you'll look really dirty. I mean, it will turn your hands like it looks like you played with coal out of a coal mine. But if you run it under just clean water, no soap, no real scrubbing, it'll rinse cleanly from your hands because it's pure carbon. If you go get a bag of like Kingsford lump charcoal, not even the briquettes, because that's a total different thing of garbage. I won't cook with that, let alone put it in my soil. But like lump charcoal, you'd think it's the same thing. It kind of looks similar and what have you. But if you get that on your hands, you go wash your hands, you're getting out some Gojo or Tide or at least some soap, and you're scrubbing a while to get your hands clean. So the difference is that when we make biochar, we're getting rid of all the tars, all the resins, all of the volatiles, completely gone. And some of that stuff really doesn't need to be in our soil with our plants. Well, when you make charcoal that you're going to cook on, you're fine having a little bit of tar and oil and stuff. It's just more fuel. So it's if you do burn it, it's much cleaner burning. Some of the oldest versions of charcoal that were actually biochar and they were used for burning purposes were made in cone kilns like we used to make biochar in the backyard are from Japan. Japan has been making charcoal using open burn systems forever. And it's something I've known about for about 5 or 6 years, but it was just this year that I started making it and really learning about it and seeing where everything's going with it. And Billy, it has at least 50 uses, not just in the soil. There's tons of things you can do with it, but it's really a high use to put it into soil. It is not a fertilizer. It is not a pH amender. It is alkaline. It might move soil a little bit in the beginning toward the alkaline side. My soil is all alkaline anyway. It really barely is even a buffer. It's inert. And it lasts, we might as well think forever. Because our bone suit, our meat covered bone suit will be gone and to nothing. And biochar that we put in the soil will still be there because it doesn't break down. The climate weirdos are all big on it because it sequesters CO2, which I'm fine putting carbon in the soil, even though I don't buy into their hysteria. Carbon belongs in the soil. It makes soil better. But it has a 3-to-1, and this is where money starts to play into this thing, a 3-to-1 return on carbon sequestration. And the reason being is you have 1 carbon and 2 oxygen molecules in a CO2, two oxygen atoms in a CO2 molecule. So every molecule of carbon you take out and sequester is 3 times the weight in what you would actually have in CO2 once it bonds with those 2 oxygen, right? So that's how the weight works out. What this means is there's companies out there that created all this carbon sequestration, carbon trading bullshit, and now they can't meet their own game, like Microsoft, right? Like, if you think of it, how many ways can Microsoft actually cut its carbon footprint? There's not a lot of ways. They're not Shell Oil Company, right? Where they can maybe change a few things about a process and make a big fake cut anyway. So what are they going to do? They're going to buy biochar. And in fact, they have an open bid right now for more biochar than exists in the world, just one company. So if you make it now it has to be made certain ways and under certain standards and all play in that market. But if somebody does that, what they have is a high-end agricultural product and a place to dump all the rest of it forever. Because you've got that carbon marketplace. And think of it like if you're a farmer and you've got your cattle and you're going to sell them as prime beef cattle, and you got some cattle that ain't maybe going to make the grade. They go to sale barn. You can always get, some market price from. You got a place for that thing to go where you can get rid of it. You can think of it like that. And there's just so much you can do with it. So we can take any direction you want to here. I don't want to turn it into my show. I'm here to talk to you, not to talk at you.
No, it's actually your show, Jack. No, I really would prefer it that way because I'm not a biochar genius. I mean, at the end of now we have made it and we have used it. We fed it to our pigs. We were doing an experiment because we can do that out here. We're not the kind of farm where we have to meet certain deadlines. We can do a lot of R&D here. And one of the things we did was basically remove the kelp on demand that we had our pigs on. Also the chickens or whatever. And we're thinking, okay, in a, let's say, grid down, whatever the case may be, and we have no access to the kelp on demand or the other minerals that we feed these animals.
Yeah.
How do we go about doing it? How was it done forever and a day? Well, reading some of Joel Salatin's work, he was talking about how he didn't talk about biochar specifically, but charcoal, which, as you said, is distinctly different. That oily, nasty feeling that you get on Kingsford, it doesn't apply there. And it also has that glass structure. We were literally out there feeding nothing else but dried comfrey. Well, let me back that up. When the ground and everything was still vegetative, we were feeding just straight up comfrey. And then when the comfrey went away and everything died back, we, of course, made plenty of comfrey hay. We started doing just nothing but straight up biochar. And these guys and gals would literally eat, and I'm talking like 5 minutes, a 5-gallon bucket of biochar.
Yes.
So if it wasn't no good and they didn't need it or their bodies didn't, but we didn't need to give them anything else. We didn't give them any kelp. We didn't give them anything but biochar. Body condition did not change one bit. If anything, 0 parasites. I mean, none.
Yeah.
I imagine it drug everything out of them. So in terms of your animal systems, I wouldn't mind hitting you with the compost and stuff too, but in terms of your animal systems, maybe you might want to tell me what was going on there. I suspect that it's, to a certain extent, that's a rhetorical question, but also what is it doing in terms of your animal systems? Because you told me how you're using it with your ducks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I literally feed it to them. I have an end cap for a 4-inch piece of PVC pipe, which just seemed about the right amount. And it was laying in my shop. So I take a 5-gallon bucket of biochar, set it right next to the feed. And every time I feed them, I take that scoop, throw it in the bucket. And I also feed them we have a custom mix feed that we feed them that's no corn, no soy, no GMOs. And to stretch that and to keep it's made with peanut meal. So the freaking dogs eat it, and put the dog on a diet because she got too fat. So she really started eating. So I mix black oil sunflower in shell with my duck feed because they like it. And then the dog can't just munch. She's got to pick around it. So it was kind of a twofer there. And I throw a cup of that, an end cap of that biochar in the feed every single day. I dump it back and forth for a couple buckets back and forth to mix it up, and I feed them that. Now, biochar in livestock feed will increase feed utilization by about 20%. So you can literally feed your animals 20% less by adding biochar to it. It used to be a common feed additive, but the Department of Making You Sad, in conjunction with the giant conglomerates, removed it as an approved feed additive because they said it had no nutritive value. Well, there is some mineral like you're referring to there, but there's not calories. It's not something that they benefit from as a food, but it does improve food utilization. But it also does another very important thing. It removes toxins from their digestive system. Now, just so people understand, we're not saying something we're not here. It is not like a chelation therapy. If you have a problem in your blood, charcoal won't do anything. It goes through the digestive system, but any kind of toxins in the stomach, upper or lower intestines, it will adsorb. And that's a very important word. When you say adsorb, people think absorb. They're two different words. Absorb is what a sponge does to water, and biochar does that with water. It will absorb. It will hold 7 times its weight in water in your soil. But adsorption is more like a magnetic process. Things stick to it. So when you put charcoal through an animal or a person, toxins literally bind up and stick to it and go out the other end. Now, eventually getting into your soil, if your animals are eating charcoal and they're pooping in their bedding and you're composting their bedding, you got charcoal in your system at the end of that. But the other thing I do that involves the animals is every time I lay down a new straw bale or a couple of wood wheelbarrows full of wood chips in my duck chicken coop, before I do that, I put down a 5-gallon bucket of crushed biochar, and then I lay that on top of it. So they're in there picking some of that out and all, but most of it stays in there. Well, they're pooping on it. Now it's in the compost system. So we function stack feeding the animals bedding with the composting process. I do some other things with it, but I really don't have to after that. At that point, I don't have to think about adding biochar to my garden. When I add compost to my garden, biochar goes with it. And the reason this is all really important is when you make biochar, crush it, you want to crush it into like a granule. You want to be no bigger than about 1/4 inch. That's ideal. If there's some bigger pieces, it won't hurt anything. It just works better when it's smaller form. Well, when you first make that biochar, you got 2 problems. One, it will literally float. It doesn't want water. It's hydrophobic. And once that surface tension breaks, it becomes hydrophilic. It'll actually hold water. But the other problem is we call it naked char. It doesn't have any nutrient. It doesn't have any minerals. It doesn't have any microbes in it right away. It's just sitting there. And if you throw that in soil without inoculating it, without breaking the surface tension, without making it habitable, eventually everything will be wonderful and better than it ever was. But the first season, it'll be worse because it will grab onto nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, etc. It will form a battery of that stuff. And then it becomes a bioactive process for the plant to get it. So little microbe lives in there. Plant wants what the microbe has. Microbe wants the plant's exudate. So they make an exchange, and there actually has to be some energy used to get that nutrient back from that biochar. So you're kind of putting all this housing in for all your microbes and nutrients empty. Well, the housing project gets filled up before it starts having, exporting back out. So we want to do that. If we put it through an animal's guts, if we put it through a composting process, that's done. So we get great results out of the gate. I feed it to my worms. So that's another one of my animal systems. People don't generally think of their worms as livestock, but they are. They're animals we care for in an artificial environment. That's livestock. So every time I feed my worms, I throw, a cup of biochar into the worm bin. And I do the very small ground biochar for them because they'll actually eat it like a bird puts something in their crop for grit, and it'll pass through the worm. Well, now you've got all of the wonderful fungal and bacterial activity of a worm bin, and you combine those two together. And I mean, what I saw this year with my starts is where I used it mostly this year because I just really started using it heavy. And I mixed my potting soil at 15% inoculated biochar. The starts I had this year were insane. And I in my systems, being as hot as we are, even in the winter out in my shop where I do my starts under lights, I have to water starts every day. If I don't, they look sad on the second day and they look dead on the third. I go 5 days without watering.
Wow.
Because again, biochar is holding 7x its weight in water once you break that surface tension. So if you think about it that way, it's about 1.1, every 1.1 pounds of dry weight biochar you would put in your garden holds an extra gallon of water. So if you put 125 pounds of biochar in a 4x8 raised bed, you just increased its water holding capacity by 100 gallons. So even if we weren't talking about all of the nutrient effect, I would do it for that. I've had people tell me, I don't need to waste my time with this. You know, I got great soil or whatever. Like, do you use any fertility at all? Yeah. Okay. Well, then you should be doing this because you would use less. And do you water at all? Yeah. Well, then you need this. And we've scratched the surface here. I mean, this is a deep topic. There's so much that biochar does. You mentioned the animals eating it. Charcoal is the oldest known medicine to mankind. People figured out to eat charcoal when they felt sick before they figured out any herbal medicine. We have like pictograph cave drawings of people using charcoal. Animals in the wilderness, when they find charcoal, will eat it. I'm sure you didn't have to put like barbecue sauce on top of the charcoal you gave your pigs, right? They wanted it instinctively. Mammals know to consume this stuff. And I mean, we can go like from there, we can go anywhere you want. But somebody asked in the comments there if it's a house, like a house for microbes. And we can take questions from them if you want to too. But it absolutely is. If you look at biochar under a microscope, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of little tiny holes. And it's like a coral reef. So think about it this way. We have these reef establishment programs where near Sanibel Island, they tore down the old causeway, built a new one. Now they have to build another new one because of the hurricane. But when they tore the first one down, they put it on barges. They went about 12 miles out to sea and they just dumped all the rubble in the ocean. It's just concrete. It didn't hurt anything. Well, you know, immediately there's not much. But you go back in 4 or 5 years and you know what you see? Boats lined up, sitting right over top of it fishing. Because once the structure was there, then the life started to form on it, and it makes an artificial reef. And you end up with all this incredibly diverse biology. Now make it microscopic, and you put biochar in your soil, you're getting this coral reef effect. It's going to attract life. And you know this as well as anybody in the world that we play in, man. The compost does not have high enough NPK for it to just be an NPK thing. When you see what good compost does to a garden, it explodes. But you're looking at usually an NPK of like a 1.51 or a really good compost, a 2, 1, 2, something like that. But the compost does what it does because of the life in it. It's the biology in it. There's plenty of nutrient in that soil. It's just the plant has a hard time getting to it. But this is an even cooler thing. When you put biochar in your compost at the beginning, you can mix it at the end to inoculate it, let it sit for a few weeks and apply it. That'll work. But if it's in there through the entire composting process, your NPK goes up because biochar grabs onto it and doesn't let it off gas. It also reduces the methane that off gases from your compost. Compost is great stuff, but it actually releases a lot of methane, which is a hell of a bigger issue for global warming, if you're worried about that, than CO2 is. It also releases a lot of CO2. Well, guess what happens? The biochar grabs onto it. So that's all nutrient that could be going to your plants. When you compost, you're losing that in that off-gassing. It reduces that. Some people, I haven't gone this far, but some people, even when they make a compost pile, they'll cap it with about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of biochar before they cover it up, so that any off-gassing that happens has to pass through that. And that's, you remember your days in the military? How's your gas mask work?
Well, yeah.
Right? How did your gas mask work? What was it? What was the magic substance inside
Charcoal.
that filter? Charcoal. Now it's activated carbon. It's like biochar's older sibling that went to an Ivy League school when they used to actually teach you stuff. Right? It's the same but different, man. It's made with a much more controlled process, but in the end, it's really the same thing.
You got me thinking about a couple of things here. Some of it spawned by what I heard you broadcast earlier today, having to do with housing. So how long is it going to be before the mayor of San Francisco says, hey, I got a new housing project. We're going to turn all these people into Soylent Green, turn them into compost. And because Jack Spirko talked about this housing in the form of biochar.
Yeah, they're going to turn the giant skyscrapers in San Francisco into affordable housing. I'm like, out of here. They're going to turn that into downtown condos that people like you and me can't afford.
Oh yeah. Well, at the end of the day, dude, like I said, maybe the idea is it's just a play on words. They're going to turn them all into Soylent Green,
Yeah.
reduce the quote carbon footprint, and we're going to put them in ready-made apartments in the form of biochar.
Yeah.
Jack,
You are the carbon they want to reduce. Do not fool yourself.
Bam, man. I think there's
carbon.
There's a cartoon somewhere in all this, bro. There's got to be. Let's move on over to the compost because I don't understand.
Billy and his cartoon friends.
Yeah, we'll have to have you narrate that, bro. I never understood, Jack. And I don't get it to this day. There's been this ongoing debate by a lot of the compost purists, let's call them, and their opposition to dealing with anything remotely related to biochar because I never understood it because I'm like, in the very least, it can't possibly hurt. You and I have talked about terra preta, and the stuff that you gave me was the closest thing that I'd ever seen of the actual terra preta that I did see. Its consistency and your stories about its activity and how well it worked. I'd only ever seen it once in my life, and it looked very much like the stuff that you had in your hand that time. Maybe not the color exactly, but the consistency sure felt the same. I don't understand. Maybe you can explain to me, maybe everybody else out there, the opposition and where this came from, why nobody thinks you should ever put it in your compost. It's never made sense to me. Maybe you have an answer to that.
So it all stems from the fact that there was a group of people actively campaigning against this when it really started to hit stride in the early 2000s. And there was actually fake research or intentionally flawed research done. So, I've explained how we have to make it habitable. We have to inoculate it. Then we apply it. So they did experiments like this. They would take 2 fields, an acre each, that were conventionally farmed for years. So they're already denuded, shitty fields. And then they would take one and they would throw fertilizer on it. They took the other one, they threw biochar on it. They planted corn or beans in it. And then they compared the results and said, well, there's actually a negative effect by the biochar and there was a huge yield improvement by fertilizer. Well, if you'd have put the fertilizer with the biochar, it would have been even better, right? So there was that, but they were using, again, naked char. And this was done because there were a group of people that really didn't want this to be a thing. And it did come out of the whole world of climate change and all that BS because they wanted to sell their own solutions. Well, it ended up too many people used it. It worked too well. You couldn't hide it anymore. So when they did what they always do, they co-opted it. Now, the problem with this is all of their slander happened and it went into people's brains and it did what it's supposed to do. Program them. That's why when a group of executives get around and talk about the next TV series they're going to do, they call it programming because all of this is programming for the giant computer in your head that weighs 3 pounds called the brain that people don't seem to want to use anymore. Well, some people try to use it in that world of programming and it corrupts the code. So there's all these myths about biochar. Well, we're going to have to cut down forests to make biochar. And you got people paying to dump tree waste all the time. The people that do it commercially generally are getting their material for free. Some of them are being paid to take it. Because in some states, because of the regulations, especially like New England, some of the regulations are so tight that these tree trimming companies, cabinet makers, sawmills, etc., they can't just conventionally burn it to get rid of it. And they can't get rid of it anywhere. And they end up paying like couple $100 a truckload sometimes to get rid of this. So Bob Wells is definitely a guy to check out if you want to know more about biochar. He's built some really interesting retort style kilns. He has a place that delivers it and pays him to take it because they're taking it a half hour less than they used to and they're paying him half of what they gave the other guy. And the guy literally didn't feel good about him taking it for free because he was solving such a problem for him. Now here in Texas, that ain't happening. You ain't going to get somebody to pay you to take stuff they bring you. But there's tons of it out there. And anything that was carbon-based, you can turn into charcoal. I saw one dude, just to mess with people, he made one of giant beetles. He put it in a retort kiln, carbonized it, and ate it. Because you can eat biochar. There's nothing there. But like if you eat biochar, it tastes like nothing. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but there's no flavor to it whatsoever. It just kind of crumbles in your mouth and dries your tongue up a bit, turns your mouth black, but it's completely inert. So you can feed it to your animals, you can eat it, but you can turn anything. And so we don't need to cut a single tree down to do this. Forest services are starting to use some of the larger open burn kilns because they're going in and they're taking all the dry tinder out of the forest because it's fuel for forest fires, right? But what they realize is it's kind of a problem. You have a lot of material, and a lot of it's not really good for timber. It's not even good for firewood. It's too small, springy, whatever. So what they're doing now, they can throw these kilns in the back of trucks. They go out right in the middle of the forest, make the biochar, and spread it out. Now, back to this flawed research. Here's an example of if you do research long enough, even when you do it wrong, it works. So they did this thing with an aspen grove. And part of it, they added fertilizer. Part of it, they added wood chips. Part of it, they added biochar. Part of it, they added biochar and fertilizer. They didn't say what kind. And then they made a graph over 5 years. And in the first year, the biochar by itself, this is naked char made right in the forest, thrown straight on the ground, not inoculated, nothing. It did the worst out of all of the groups. In the 5th year, it blew every single other method away once it had time for those colonies to form. It even outperformed the biochar that was fertilized, which is why I think it was probably like 10, 10, 10 NPK or something like that, because they didn't say in the study what kind of fertilizer they used. So there's a lot of this malice that's been created, and it's stuck with people. And there's people that just don't like anything that they hear, right? Anything that's not what, they're usually liberals, but they're actually very conservative in their mindset. Whatever they grab onto, they don't want to change their paradigm. Well, you've got something that's been used by mankind for 6, 7, 8,000 years. The terra preta soil is like the earliest examples. They estimate about 6,000 years old, and it's still fertile. And I just did a presentation on this down in Bastrop, and my last slide was a piece of deadfall redwood that a guy had milled a bunch of stuff out of, left this one piece because it wasn't good for nothing. And right in the middle of that stump was a little bitty spruce tree about this big, growing straight up out of that trunk. And I put that slide there to make this point. If you make an enemy out of something that is unstoppable, there's a word for that, and that word is stupid. And nature is unstoppable. That little tree is going to eat that multi-thousand ton log and become a new tree growing off of it. That's the very definition of unstoppable. You and I can't do that, but this little spruce tree all by itself in the middle of the woods can. And so when we're tying into charcoal and we're turning into the power that fire is and the way that it shaped human history and agriculture, that's as natural as it gets. So we can either harness nature and make it our ally, or we can continue to fight it with chemicals. And the second one ends not so well. It is the epitome of Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity, right? Like Bonhoeffer was a writer and a minister in Nazi Germany. He ended up dying in a concentration camp just a few days before the war ended, unfortunately. And his theory of stupidity was that a stupid person is more dangerous than a violent person. Because if I have a violent person, I can just use violence. I can't reason with the stupid. I can't use violence against the stupid because there's too many of them. And when he said stupid, he said, I want to be very clear. I don't mean intellectually slow. You can have somebody with 130 IQ that's stupid. They've been made stupid by the programming we're talking about. So coming full circle back around, that's what happened. These people were made stupid to a subject that they should be the first people to embrace.
Bam. That's why he's the best at it, y'all. I mean, it's amazing how you can take these bookends and put it on something. I mean, weave this tapestry that that only Jack Spirko can do. Jack, let's get into the people that want to take action out there. As Joel Salatin often says, we are in a, quote, homesteading tsunami right now.
Yeah, we are.
Now, judging by the numbers on YouTube, the channels like yours and mine, you would never believe that because there's clearly some suppression going on out there. But the people that do want this information will almost certainly find it. They always do. Just like I and you and everybody else out there, we are unstoppable when we're, on the trail of something we want. So naturally, there's a number of people out there that are thinking, okay, I think I want to give this biochar a shot. I think Jack Spirko's made a really good case as to why I should give it a shot. How do they go about doing that? How do they start? If they want to do it at home, should they buy it, or is it difficult to make?
It's not difficult to make. Could I bring some slides up here?
Please do.
I don't
If
know.
you need any tech on my end, bro, you know you're screwed because I can barely operate this thing now. I'll have to call William back in here.
Let me, should be able to just do it from my computer, because I think this is a question that will definitely benefit when I'm talking about a cone kiln by somebody seeing a cone kiln. So as soon as this uploads, so the easiest way, it may not be the most efficient way, but the easiest way is an open burn cone kiln. And there's a lot of other types of things you can use to do this. But if you think about how we build a fire that we want to burn fully, we build a pyramid up, right? So the top is more narrow than the bottom. Cone kiln reverses that. It's kind of like an upside down fire. And the flames actually become a cap. So these are various cone style kilns. The one on the left on the screen right there is my personal kiln. It's called the Best Biochar char kiln. I don't know if it's the best. That's just what they call it. They did something pretty innovative, though. It actually ships to you in 3 pieces, and it's flexible steel, and it comes with its own little pop rivet gun and pop rivets. And you pop rivet it together. That way they can ship it flat because these things are bulky. A lot of people have gone to building them more in a box shape, like you see on the bottom right. That's a lot easier to build because it's 4 trapezoids in a square, right? So it's real easy to have something like that made in a machine shop. The one you see up toward the other last one there, it's really long, basically the same shape. That's just so you don't have to cut your material up. But you can go even lower tech than this. You can take a 55-gallon drum you can buy for about $20 on Craigslist. And you can either cut what I call a saddle. I don't know the correct term for it, but an angle grinder or a plasma cutter, what have you. You just cut a saddle in it. Or you can set it up on a hubcap wheel like you see that one there on that rough angle like that. And either one of those will work. The big thing is we don't want any air coming in from the bottom. And so we're going to start a small fire. We're going to get it going. We're going to keep adding material. When we add material, we're going to get some smoke. But once we build up that bed of coals, you're talking like the external, like a thermal gun on the outside of that will read about 600 degrees C, right? Not Fahrenheit, not American, right? That's hot. And so at that point, anything you throw in there will combust. But again, those flames are a cap. Let me back this up. So if you look at my kiln right there, if you notice, the wood is all visible. And what you're actually seeing burning is the gas. So you're going to lose some of the wood, but most of the wood ends up carbonizing, and that flame itself becomes a cap because you can't get air down into the system, if that makes sense. Yeah. And this harnesses the fact that wood always burns twice. So have you ever heard the old joke you play on your buddies when you're in school? You ever see a match burn twice? You ever heard that one, Billy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell your audience this, so don't ruin it for me.
Oh, yeah.
So the trick is you light a match, and you show it to the person, say, how many times has it burned? They say 1. You blow it out, and once you blow it out, you touch them with it, burns their arm, and they go, how? And you go, that burned twice. But the reality is wood really does burn twice. And if you look at the way a match burns, and if you look like the first and second picture, you can see it almost looks like a candle wick as that soft wood is off-gassing. And then eventually it combusts and actually burns the remaining carbon. So all we're doing with these kilns is stopping the process before we get there. So to me, this is the easiest way. There's also a thing called a retort, which is more conventional when you make charcoal, where the wood is inside something with just a little bit of ability for the gas to get out of it, and you do a fire around it. And there's a T-Lud, there is a retort, there's I can't even think of the other one routine. And there's big retorts where these things look like commercial made stuff. It looks like a garbage dumpster that the wood goes inside. And those are maybe more efficient, but nothing is any easier than what you're looking at right here, because it's just kind of having a campfire, right? I mean, as long as you can size your material to the right size, you're good to go. And so this to me is the starting place. Now, the downside, you have to stay around this thing. You have to pay attention to it. And when your top layer of wood starts to ash, you need to add some more wood. And there's a learning curve. How much do I add and when do I add it? Like the first time you do it, you're probably going to put your fire out. The second, after you fix that, you're going to probably put a little less wood, put a little bit too much wood. You have smoke going everywhere, which means you're not making charcoal when that smoke's going. But in time, you'll learn to add about this much at this point. And then the other thing you got to do is you got to stick around until the burn's done. Because even though everything I said is true about controlling the oxygen flow, if you don't put that out, when it finishes, it will start to fully combust the carbon from the top down. And you'll come out in the morning and you'll have a pile of ash in the bottom, which is good for nothing but, liming soil, basically, right? So you do have to put it out. And we put it out by quenching it. We fill it up with water. That's what I do. So people like to just lightly do it, or you can always end up with some burning. I completely soak it, and I add some wood vinegar when I do that. And I learned that from Michael Whitman at Blue Sky Biochar. If you add wood vinegar when you quench your biochar, and I don't mean much, I mean a kiln that size, and that's, full, it's probably 15 gallons. The amount of biochar you get out of by the time you crush it's about 8 or 9 if you completely fill it up. But if you add that wood vinegar, it actually breaks the surface tension and speeds up the process of getting water into and making the biochar hydrophilic, where it actually wants water. It actually sucks that water up, and then you drain it. And there's this belief that you can't use a wood chipper with this stuff because you'll make a giant black cloud. If you put dry biochar in a wood chipper, you will in fact make a giant black cloud, and you won't like it. If you quench it and then let it dry, completely drain it and let it dry for 2 days is kind of the magic number. You can put it right through a wood chipper, and it comes out. It is the best looking granular I've ever seen come out of any method of doing biochar. And so that's how I'd recommend getting started. If you don't have a leaf blower or you don't have a wood chipper, a good strong leaf vacuum like a steel will do it really well for you. Or you throw it in an old feed bag and drive over it with your truck until you're happy with it. You'll never get all of it down to a fine granular that way, but it'll work. I mean, do you think that the Aztecs and Amazonian Indians had a leaf chipper? Right? So it'll work. So that's where I'd start making it. If you want to buy it, just make sure you're buying from a company that is doing it the right way, because you can make biochar out of a lot of things, and not all of it is really great. It's not all really great. If you want to pull that slide down or whatever, I don't have access to do that, but there you go. Let me just real quick. Okay, so you could make biochar out of things like bagasse, which is like what's left over when you squeeze sugar cane, or corn stover, or things like that. And it's fine to be used more in an industrial thing, and it will put carbon in soil, but it doesn't have all those really great holes because it doesn't have that structure. So it's just a dust. So if you're going to buy it for use in your garden, make sure you buy it from somebody that's doing it right, making it out of either hardwood or softwood. And then there's some things to look out for. So if you're buying it and you're buying it naked, you want it dry because you're buying it by weight. So if it's wet, you're paying for water. The other side of this is a lot of the good manufacturers of this stuff, when they're selling it to gardeners and farmers, they don't want to sell it naked. They don't want to trust that you are going to do what you're supposed to do with it. And they're afraid they're going to sell you a ton of biochar. You're going to go throw it on your field. You ain't going to inoculate it. And you're going to blame them when you have a bad year. And you won't remember them 3 years later when you have a great year. So they're selling it pre-inoculated. And so that's fine, but just make sure you know what you're buying and what you're paying for. And then for your folks that are big into the compost tea and all, the best way to move microbes from one property to another when it has to go through something slow like the mail is in inoculated biochar. It can live in there. It's protected from light. It has a house and it can breathe. So like when people buy compost tea from a store, there ain't nothing alive in there. It can't live in there.
Thank you. It's anaerobic.
You pull your air stones at 48 hours. If you don't put it on your garden, that stuff starts dying almost instantly. So it might still have a benefit, but you're not taking all these soil microbes of fungi and bacteria, etc., and putting them in a wet substance in a bottle and shipping it anywhere. You can do it as an inert granular, but there's nothing that does it as well as biochar does. So if you have somebody that's got a banging organic program and they're doing great things with their compost, you get a little bit of that compost, you make some compost tea, you inoculate biochar, you send it halfway around the world. Those microbes are going. They're going to be alive when they get there.
Jack, as far as putting this through the wood chipper, is there any danger when this stuff becomes aerosolized, or I don't even know if that's the word. So how would you avoid that?
There's two things you got to be really careful with biochar, especially when it comes to crushing, grinding, anything like that. The first one is when biochar goes everywhere and is fine except your lungs. So when it's dry, you need to be wearing a mask, and not the mask they told us all to wear during the COVID. You need a good solid N95 sealing mask, because you're basically risking giving yourself black lung. Now, this is not a huge deal, because once it's wet, that doesn't happen anymore. So we always want to try to work with it moistened if we can. But the other thing we have to be careful of, it is charcoal, and we're making little tiny pieces out of it, and we're blowing it through the air. So you know what we don't want? We don't want spark. So nails. So no, I'm serious, because if you drop biochar with a nail into a wood chipper, you could make a bomb.
Oh now, my goodness!
This is why and I can never remember what the hell they call this thing. It's like a badger or a bobcat, but it's something like that. But it's not what it is. They call it something named after some animal. The commercial operators use it's basically a giant leaf vacuum. It kind of looks like a water buffalo. You remember water buffaloes from the military days, right? It kind of looks like it has a giant suction thing on it, and they climb in these big retorts and they suck that charcoal up. Well, those things are designed. So, and I don't know exactly how the hell they pull this off. It won't vacuum up a nail. It just won't go in. It won't pick it up. It's like it's not light enough or something. Huh. So, that's what they use, because when you're vacuuming it out like 4 metric freaking tons of charcoal in a box, you get a spark, you get a boom. So those are the two things you have to be careful of. Dry char, whenever you're working with it, you need to mask up. You know, we can make fun of the mask tars all we want, but there's a place for masks, and that's one of them. And then the other one is you need to be careful you're not going to create some sort of a combustible event.
You know, that never did occur to me, that really it'd be no different than working in a grain elevator. Mm-hmm. I mean, in fact, worse potentially, because
if you think a grain elevator go kaboom, get a boxcar of biochar to go off.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, bro, because it didn't even occur to me. Good night, man. We're getting quite the education on this. Jack, is there any other place? I mean, folks, if you have it, I don't recall what episode it was where Jack actually did practically a dissertation on all things biochar. I wanted to get him on here to kind of wet your beak. Do you know right off what episode that was, Jack, that you...
The number I don't know, but if people go to thesurvivalpodcast.com/biochar, they'll find that episode. They'll find the video presentation of that episode. They'll see some other stuff there from me and a ton of other great places. They'll find resources. Right now, they'll even get a discount on my membership, because I set that up for the talk I just gave, and I hadn't taken it down yet. So there's even a discount there for MSB membership if you want. But all of that will be there. And again, it's thesurvivalpodcast.com/biochar. One word, no hyphens, no nothing. It'll pull that right up. And yeah, you're right. That episode, that wasn't really a podcast. That was more like a free class. It was about 2.5 hours long. And I usually have a couple hours of prep into an episode. I probably had 4 weeks of prep work into that.
And it showed. I honestly,
a ton of work into it.
Jack, I watched that thing. To be honest with you, I listened to it the first time out, and then I realized, okay, like me, when I'm out there working, I'm listening to something and I'm like, okay, I hear you describing things that clearly I can't see. And now we have done it here with the retort method, and it worked out great. I mean, everything, it just seems honestly stupid. If I'm out here burning anyway, why not stack the function of making some biochar at the same time?
Yeah.
And I never understood. I mean, you explained it perfectly. I never understood this bitter opposition that certain people within, let's say, the composting intelligentsia, they would have all these different claims about why you shouldn't use it or why it's unnecessary. And I'm like, this is just plain stupid if this is your argument, because at the end of the day, I got something that holds enormous amounts of water. I know that for every 1% organic matter I put into that soil, my water retaining capability goes through the roof. But why not make it better?
Well, here's the thing with that, Billy. What happens to that organic matter across time is it breaks down in off gases and goes away, right? it doesn't last forever. If you have soil and you're cropping that soil and you're adding compost to it the reason your organic matter stays high is because you're adding it every year. You put enough biochar in to increase the amount of carbon in the soil by, let's say, 2%. That 2% is there. It's not forever, but it may as well be in a human life cycle. We have soils that are 6,000 years old that still have the charcoal in them that was put there by, our ancestors. That's to turn away from something that powerful doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I'll admit, I didn't really get caught up in the anti-char hype. I just didn't dig into it. I've had that kiln for somebody came on my show. We did a show about it 5 years ago. I think we made 1 bucket of char out of class or something. I just never really got into it. And I didn't do the deep dive to learn why. To me, it's a soil amendment. I got lots of soil amendments. I want to lighten my soil tilth. I can get expanded shell for $90 a ton, but it doesn't do what biochar does. And I've seen that this year. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos I put out of the garden this year, but I'm 2 months ahead is what it feels like. I feel like I'm 2 months ahead, and I was actually 3 weeks behind starting my seeds. And I feel like I'm 2 months ahead on the process. It's that dramatic. And it's only first year. I didn't actually start incorporating it into the compost process yet. That compost you saw didn't have biochar in it yet. You should see what that looks like when you amend it with about 15% biochar.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Like in places where you have your ducks out there right now, where you've been basically, it sounds to me like to a certain extent, you're doing a deep bedding method out there with the ducks. Okay, so at some point you're going to gather all that stuff. And if I remember correctly, you're going to put it in the Johnson, in your version of what do you call
them Johnson Sue-ish, because I don't want to badmouth. I don't want somebody to look at that, think it's what Johnson Sue does, and kind of wreck their brand for what they do. I don't want to climb up a ladder to dump material into a compost pile, and I don't want to weld rebar together, and I don't want to set up drip irrigation. So I just take a piece 4-foot high goat fencing and make a ring about 6 foot across with it. Make 3 of those.
So that's how you're going to use this. That's how you're going to use your So this will be the first time. Now it takes a while for it to unfold in a Johnson Sue bio or a Johnson Sue light bioreactor. Now it's not going to be an 18-day Berkeley pile or not the one that I'm doing right now. But at the end of the day,
it's about 3 months is what it takes for mine to break down like that. Now, I'm probably using a lot more manure than Johnson Sue is, and I'm using a straw and wood chip mix where they're doing pretty much wood chips, right? So it's all fungal and it's relatively slow. My piles, you throw a compost thermometer in them, they run right up 140, 150 degrees. They just don't stay there anywhere near as long as when you're turning it. And you get pretty much a full breakdown at about 3 months. And then the thing that I do, I also don't want to use weed blocker as a cap or whatever. It's just another resource. So I have a huge pile of wood chips out in my field. I get tree trimmers and stuff to dump them there. I just, once the pile's completely built, I do a cap about 4 inches deep of wood chips, and I do wrap the fencing with the weed blocker. So it stays moist, and then I do 4 3-inch pipes around the toward the outer edge. And I do 1 piece of the thin-walled 4-inch, like French drain style pipe in the center. And the reason I do that is less airflow. And it's more about the fact that the really cheap green sprinklers, the plastic rings, fit around one of those perfectly like it's a glove. So then I put one of those sprinklers at the center of each pile. And all I have to do is turn the water on with a timer for 2 minutes. And that keeps them water. So now I'm out there I'm not there with drip lines and all that stuff. And just walk out, turn the mechanical timer, to about 5 minutes, and do that a couple times a week. And it stays wet all the way through. And I don't even once that's broken down, I just leave it there. And when I need some, I just go pull it out of the pile. I don't ever relocate it or anything. It goes from the pile to the garden. And at the end of the season, whatever's left, all top dresses my main garden area. Whatever's left, and then we make another pile. You're right, we do deep litter. I make compost once a year. I'm not like you going out gathering stuff up and making compost for resale or anything. I make enough for myself, and I end up making each one of those things ends up being about 1.5 yards. So I end up, with what 4.5 yards of compost every year for my garden, and the best compost you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, man. Especially when you got his compost as local as you can possibly get it. I'm just curious to see, because I already know in my mental where I am mentally that this is going to be a winner, and I can't wait to start doing it in mine because there's no lose. I mean, I'm in a process right now of doing a composting class on my Patreon channel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, when this thing is all said and done, I got piles. Let's see here. I just started. Okay, I got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got basically 4 to 5 cubic yards out there curing right now.
Yeah.
Using another method. And I'm thinking, okay, what is the downside of actually putting some of this biochar in there? And the answer is 0. And it stays put. Let's say you did all the wrong things and you went out there and you decided to go till everything up. All your microbes die, everything else. Well, guess what? You still retain the water retaining capabilities, even at the end of the day, if that's all you got out of the deal, especially when you run systems like this where we got open pastures out here and sheep in the area. Is there a way? Let me ask you this real quick, Jack, and I know you probably got to get going too.
I'm good, man. I'm good. I made time for you.
Yeah, I want to. How would you use this in a pasture setting? Because that's the one.
I'd start out by feeding it to the sheep. They'll eat it and they'll poop it out, and then you're halfway there. Once it goes through an animal, once it goes through a ruminant, you don't have to worry about inoculation. There's a lot of other things you could do, though. How much pasture, acreage are we talking?
I mean, we're talking, well, let's just say for John Q, whatever out there, let's just say it's a single acre for easy numbers. I mean, are we talking, I know we don't want to aerosolize this stuff and have it out there.
Well, there is a company called American Biochar, and they grind char into such a small particle size that it'll actually go through drip irrigation, which is one way that it's used. But you can buy it as a liquid by the gallon, and I don't remember what the dilution is. I have a gallon of it out there. I haven't tried yet, but that would probably be the best thing for like a pasture for a quick application is you spray it. So we don't want to aerosolize dry char, but wet is no big. And once it's wet, it's good. And I had it's a husband and wife team that run that company, and I think it's American Biochar. And if you just go to my site, you can find it on that biochar page, or just search for biochar using the search box. And they had pictures when I had them on, and they went to, it was a park, and they did a trial, and they just basically sprayed one side of the park, turf grass that kids play on, and didn't spray the other side. And 3 years later, the difference was incredibly dramatic. And they did core samples, and the roots got down it was something like 12 or 16 inches deeper on the treated side than the untreated side, which was, there wasn't enough biochar in that to do a lot of things that we're talking about. They said that themselves, but whatever it did, it opened up those pathways and let the root, and all it was is that it was a much deeper rooted turf grass, and deep roots in perennial pastures is everything. Right. That's what it's all about. I'm sure if you've seen the pictures of dudes, like with some of the prairie grass, where like the dude's standing and they got the root cleaned off, and it's, 18 foot of root. That's not going to ever suffer from a drought. I can't do that here because I go 4 inches deep and I got rock. So you ain't ever getting through that rock. But yeah, I mean, that would be one way. Feeding up to them would be another way. Making compost. And then, I mean, like Johnson Sioux, they say that they put like a ton to the acre, right? Which you won't even see it. I mean, you're just broadcast, like a broadcast spreader to do that, because it's about the soil life. So, if you went maybe a little higher than that and maybe did 5 or 6 tons of biochar infused per the acre with a spreader, and did that once a season for 4 or 5 seasons, I think you'd have a dramatic impact. But I mean, with sheep, with sheep, but they're not big like cattle, but they're still fairly large animals. So if you made biochar in a kiln and just wherever you just make it in the field and just spread it out, they're going to walk on it, they're going to poop on it, they're going to eat it, and over time you'll improve the pasture that way. I mean, there's the way I've always put it, there's no way to do it wrong, but there's better ways than some ways are better than others. You can do it imperfectly, but you can't really hurt anything. you can't really mess anything up. I mean, the key is, again, you don't need to be cutting down trees to make this stuff. You cut down trees, you're going to cut down anyway. You take standing dead, you take your prunings. As long as you do that, I mean, you're definitely obeying the care of the earth ethic of permaculture there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We always got to worry about that part of it. You know, I'm absolutely intrigued, Jack. I can't wait to do something of an experiment with it. I already know exactly how I'm going to go about doing this, but I'm wondering now, my brain's kind of tripping here because I'm thinking, could this be suspended in a compost extract? Could it be suspended in a compost tea? Well, if the answer is yes, which clearly it is, I mean, obviously, like you said, we can get it to go through sprinkler heads. Yeah. So we're essentially putting out, if, for example, let's say you have a jacked up pasture, high compaction, it's barely bacterial, you know, it's definitely got no fungus in it. If you were to just go through and take a patch, what I intend to do, I think, is to go out there with a, let's say what do you call them things you jump on and it basically aerates the earth, or you can turn the soil over, broad fork. Let's say you have a broad fork. I wonder if you were to take this stuff and suspend it in some sort of aqueous solution and stick it down in the holes of a broad fork where you can really get this thing down there, maybe 2 feet. I bet you money, like the people you described putting it over the park, to me, it just seems like common sense that the microbes eventually are going to find a home in there. And then as the season unfolds, these microbes now, because they have a home, now they can make it down into the soil. Then with every rain, you know, it gets a little further into the soil, you know, and then a little further in the further still. I wonder if I were to go out there with a broad fork, take a couple of test areas, because I think I want to do that because we do so much R&D around here. I think I want to actually do that. And my hypothesis is I think it's going to knock it right out of the park. I don't see how you lose.
If you, I just brought in a screen share. If you bring that up on the screen, that's the product that that's pretty much the product you're talking about, because they do a humate and they do a thing they call Vital Blend, which has the beneficial microorganisms suspended in that biochar solution. That's the product I'm talking about right there. And again, it is American Biochar is the company. ambiochar.com is the website. And I mean, by all means, make stuff yourself if you want to. But if you're going to deal with somebody, these guys here and Blue Sky Biochar, which is Michael Whitman, and I'll tell you, if you think I know about biochar, that dude is OG with everything when it comes to farming, environmentalism, et cetera. That dude was part of the very first Earth Day when Earth Day meant something. And he's kind of become my biggest mentor on biochar. And those two companies, I would buy anything they sell and trust the quality of it. Because I've listened to enough podcasts about this to know that there are some companies that what they're doing is probably not what you want to be putting on your property.
Wow. And they can go ahead and find, folks, somebody posted up in here what episode that was Jack did where he talked about this, but you want to go over there and become a member of his member support brigade and all the other things. I wish I could find that doggone thing. It was 3,200 and something. Apparently it done flipped past me right quick. Folks, you're going to want to go check 3,250. That's what episode it is. Okay. But you're going to want to go over there and listen to this, folks. I don't often listen to podcasts twice, but that's one where I had to. And I was thankful to do it. And the reason why, number one, whenever I listen to something that to me is an education, and that truly was an education, I inoculate my brain with it while I'm out there working. And then when I know there are things I got to see, because I have to remember this, I don't have the benefit of being able to go back there. So when I watch these things or when I learn these things, it has to be in my cabeza. No two ways about it. I got to be able to retain it. So when I went back and watched it, y'all, it knocked my junk into my watch pocket. I ain't kidding you. I'm sitting here thinking, Jack, okay, I've heard, I can't believe that this just slipped my radar. I can't believe that I don't know. And then when I'm thinking, okay, what is the net good versus the net bad? There is no net bad unless you're one of those dopes that's going to go out there and inhale this stuff. So I'm thinking, okay, there is no way I'm not going to do this. Yeah. I just want to make sure that I have, because we do a lot of R&D out here, what I have to make absolutely sure of, I want to do a control with
Yeah.
just biochar. I want to do it with the compost. I want to do the compost by itself. I want to see, I want to do test batches all the way around.
Yeah.
And I already have a hypothesis about, because like you said, it's been used forever and a day. It's in the terra preta. It's in the best soils on the planet. And somewhere along the way, the powers that shouldn't be have told us, like everything else that's great for us, that, oh, we shouldn't use this. And I bet if I were to look behind the money, if I were to follow the money behind all the people saying that we shouldn't be messing with this, I'm probably not going to be surprised. And I'm guessing you've probably done some of that legwork.
Yeah, like I said, that whole campaign kind of fell apart, and it fell apart about 2012-ish is kind of when they gave up. And then by 2014, it had been completely co-opted. But it just remains because, well, you know how the internet is. Nothing ever goes away unless you take it down. And then archive.org, you can still find it if you really want to.
Unless it's Hunter Biden or Hunter Biden.
Yeah, it gets memory hold by the press. You know, that's a different thing altogether. But I mean, I'm not saying that scientists would intentionally flaw research, cough, hydroxychloroquine, but they tend to do it at times because, you know, the most honest person in the world, you can make them tend to be dishonest if you just start laying hundreds in front of them. And a lot of people, like, they ain't going to sell out, but when them hundreds start to turn in $10,000 grants, and there's 5 of them or 6 of them or 100 of them, and you can't do your research without those grants, you start doing research the way the people with the money tell you. There's an old saying, I can't remember who said it, it was a statesman from the UK back in the 1800s. And he said, when one hand gives money to another hand, the hand that does the giving is always in control of the situation because it's always held higher, right? Mm-hmm. The hand that puts the money over is always above the hand receiving the money. So the receiver of the money is at the bequest of the person giving money. And that's all this was about money. Once they figured out how they could make money out of it, well, all of a sudden, maybe this stuff isn't so bad. But the residual programming still out there in those brains. I can't find anything to say negative about it. It does take some effort. You know, you're out making charcoal when you could be drinking a beer or something. But, you know, you can drink a beer while you make charcoal. It's not that hard. And like with these smaller kilns like I have, and I'm about to build one out of the 50-gallon drum, the sideways drum I showed you, so I can do larger pieces. But right now, the only real work is sizing the material. Well, I went on Amazon, bought a pair of electric pruners, not because I'm lazy, because I have a grandson that tends to be lazy. Turns out you give a 12-year-old a pair of electric pruners, they just can't get over cutting shit up. They don't know what to do with themselves if they ain't cutting something. So you point them at a pile of brush and say, make it small. And it just, you know, I planted a bunch of jujubes. Don't do that. It's a good fruit, but there's other fruits that don't sucker the way jujube does. Jujube suckers into this wall of thorns, right? So his job every day is to go out and fill the duck water up. So I give him the electric pruners and tell him prune jujube suckers and put them in the bucket. And it don't matter how much he does because whatever he does is something I didn't have to do. And then within a few weeks, I got another batch of biochar out of jujube suckers. That's function stacking the interest of a young man. You give him a pair of hand pruners and tell him to prune something, he's going to figure a way out of it. You give him an electronic toy, right? He's out there pruning his little butt off. And so, like, you can harness some other labor streams into this if you've got kids. And I promise you, and if you go to my site and look for electric pruners, you'll see the ones I recommend. And please use my link. I'll just say that.
Yeah, definitely check him out, y'all. All I know, in addition to all the other wonderful information here, I just learned a new way to cuss somebody out without cussing. Call him a jujube sucker.
A jujube sucker.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever dealt with it, but you know, they talk about the crown of thorns that they put on Jesus's head. Whatever they use probably ain't as bad as this stuff. It is, the tree itself is thorny, but the suckers are just, they're like needles. They're like honey locust, but there's more thorns.
Is it worse than Osage orange back there?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I like Osage orange.
Yeah, I do too, man.
Osage orange makes a fence, bro. You know how to do an Osage orange fence. You take an Osage orange, a couple of them, throw them in a 5-gallon bucket, they fall apart. You take the seeds, plant them every 6 inches where you want a fence row. They'll come up they'll grow about 3 foot to 4 foot the first year, big long whip, bend them over, counter bend, and they'll send. And in about 4 years, you'll have a fence a pig can't get through.
Oh man, that's cool, man. So that's like some old school tanglefoot, man.
That's Thomas Jefferson's method.
Oh, dang.
If you read the garden book and the farm book, both of those by Thomas Jefferson, you find out about Osage orange. And I think Ben Franklin was the one who said it was eye high and hog tight, I think is the way that Franklin described it. It's that old. It goes back to the founding of the country. And it was actually highly encouraged at that time for farmers to use it rather than rock, because it was a living structure and it could go anywhere and you didn't have to haul rock around. And, before we had tractors and shit, you wanted your farmers productive, and the less time they spent hauling rocks around, the more time they spent actually growing food so people could eat.
Oh man, that's what I'm talking about. All I know is that was some really good stuff in the fireplace too, man. That's the same as Bodark, right? I mean, Osage orange.
Yeah. We're talking about the same plant. It's real like a waxy leaf. It's a big green thing. I don't know why they call it orange. Some people actually call it horse apple. I think they call it orange because the leaf looks a lot like a citrus leaf. It's got that shiny green color to it. And the thorns are pretty wicked. But jujube, I don't know if you ever tried a jujube. Jujube looks a lot like a little apple, great big seed in the middle of it. And the other problem I have with it here is I get all the suckers. I don't get much of it to eat because as soon as it starts to sweeten, we have so many dadgone fire ants. You get one that looks perfect. You break it open and it's full of ants. And because a jujube, when you dry it, they call it Chinese date. It'll get up to like a dried out jujube, get up to like 45, 50% sugar.
Wow.
So my original plan for them was I was going to make jujube moonshine. But but I just don't get enough jujube because of the dadgone ants. I mean, that's my biggest problem here is ants. And nothing eats a fire ant that lives in North America. There's a little fly predator in Brazil where they're native that kills them. It sounds like a horrific sci-fi novel when you hear how they do it. They sting them in the abdomen, and then the little grub hatches from the egg, and it crawls up into the ant's head and eats its brain from the inside. And then the ant's head literally falls off. And the undertaker ants, because ants have undertakers, carry the dead body and head just outside and drop it. And then the baby hatches right outside and goes back in and kills more. So that's why they're not a problem where they're from. And Texas A&M did research on them, and they did it down at the border, and they figured that was as far south as you could go. And if they didn't reproduce there, they wouldn't anywhere else. And they didn't. They worked for a season, but then they couldn't overwinter here. So we have no way to get rid of them damn things other than orange oil.
I was going to ask you that. I knew we were talking all biochar, and folks, go check out Jack's site. You're going to be glad you did.
We can talk about anything, bro.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to switch into that real quick because I know one of the biggest questions I get asked, because when we lived in Texas, I didn't have a solution for it. I basically took Stefan Subkowiak's way of looking at it in terms of, you know what, if I can't destroy these, if I can't find a reasonable way of keeping them in balance, maybe I should just take solace in knowing that maybe they're doing some of the work that the earthworms were doing when you think about the exchange that they do at the surface and underneath. Okay. So I was sitting here wondering if, like you said, I know for a fact, based on the information I know, is that depending on what pest is coming on, messing with whatever, I know that there is a fungal solution that will do exactly what you described. It will go in there, tunnel into the thorax of whatever said beetle, bug, whatever pest there is. I gotta believe, or are you aware of anything? Because before you got on here, somebody asked that very question regarding fire ants. Do you know of anything?
So I haven't looked into this yet. Nick Ferguson, who's part of my expert council, said there's a nematode they've discovered that will eat larvae and eggs of fire ants. And you can buy this nematode and you mix it into a sprayer and you spray it, and it supposedly wipes out fire ants fairly well. Now, the problem that a lot of things like that have is if I kill all the wildebeest and the zebras on the Serengeti, I don't have any lions anymore. So if it works, then if it specifically targets one organism, once it wipes them out, then they die too, and then the fire ants come back. I am a believer that I use chemical warfare as limited as possible, but fire ant is worthy of chemical warfare. And I use 2 tablespoons of orange oil to a gallon of water, and I drench mounds. And I don't try to get rid of all of them. I just, when they're in a problem area, which is anywhere I might step or dig, they have to go. Because, and you can say whatever you want about, like, if you have a healthy ecosystem, nothing gets out. No, these things, you know what they are. They're invasive as hell. And you can't reason with a fire ant. Like, if you wanted me to write a horror movie, I would write a movie about 6 scientists that make a flying fire ant. Right? Imagine a fly, and I don't mean drones when they breed. I mean, you step on a nest and they come out like wasps. That would be the most horrific. These things need to go. And what happens when you put that orange oil on them, it decomposes their exoskeletons. And it's got to be a horrible way to go. And I don't wish that on anything except fire ants. I remember first time I ever got bit by fire ants, I lived in Florida when I was a kid. I sat down in the grass, laid my arm in, and I didn't even know what they were. I was like 5 years old. I ran home crying, arm all swollen up, these damn ants all over me. I didn't even know what they were. They are an evil bastard, and I go way back with them, and I don't want to. I want them all gone. They don't belong here. I have no problem with them dying. I try not to wipe anything out, but they're not supposed to be here. They're just, honestly, the whole invasive species thing. I have a book on my site. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a guy that advocates for a lot of it. But he'll even contend there are certain things that, kudzu is actually a problem. Fire ants are actually a problem. But the orange oil, 2 tablespoons to a gallon of water. There's a product called Antifuego. No one wants to ship it anymore because it's bulky and it leaks. But it's basically compost tea, horticultural molasses, and orange oil. So you can make that yourself. And what that does is first it melts the insects. Then the sugars attract beneficial soil organisms. And the compost tea improves the soil. So while you're killing fire ants, you're improving things. Most of the places I kill fire ants are not places I'm really intensively cultivating. So I just use the orange oil. But if I have to use it in my garden, I do that. And if you don't want to make your own compost tea, like Garrett juice, something like that, you can use as your compost tea component. And that does a really great job. There's people say if you get really a lot of biological life in your soil, fire ants don't like it. My gardens, I can stick my arm down to my elbow in the garden. It's growing incredible, and fire ants still colonize the garden. I think it has a lot to do with where you live. Like where I'm at, moist soil is a premium. So if you have moist soil, fire ants are going to go in. And my freaking compost piles of freaking ants. The Johnson Sioux method, you're supposed to put a couple pounds of worms at the end, after it's kind of broke down and the heat's gone down. If I put worms in there, the ants just go in there and kill them all. So, I've even used the orange oil on my compost piles because I'll go in there and dig and they come up and bite me. I'm like, okay, you got to go. You got to go. And the orange oil will knock back some of your growth for about 2 weeks, and it goes completely inert after that. So if they were on something that was doing really well, they might get a stay of execution because I don't want to knock that growth back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as soon as it's over, as soon as that plant's chemical death. Chemical death, man. Better living through chemistry.
Hey, I was wondering, Jack's a while back, a guy we mutually know, Nicholas Bertner.
Okay.
I could swear that he told me that there was an old boy in Dallas renting out anteaters. I could have swore.
That sounds like something he'd say.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I don't know how effective that would be. I mean, do you know how many ants are in one fire ant? I don't know the answer to that, but I know it's in the hundreds of thousands. That has to be a hungry ant eater. And I mean, I've tried to figure out a purpose for them. I mean, if you take a shovel and stick it in there, they'll run all over the shovel.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, I'll feed my fish these freaking things. And I just put a shovel in there and then bang them off in a bucket and dump their ass in one of my little fish ponds. Well, my intern at the time, a guy named Josiah, said, well, before you do that, he didn't have a lot of good ideas. This was a good one, though. He's like, let me check into that. And he found out the people that tried to do it, daggone fish died because the acidity and the toxins in the ant venom, actually, if they eat enough of the fire ant, it kills them. So I guess an anteater probably would get around that defense, but I just can't see an anteater. And I've heard, dump pasta water in. You kill the ones on the surface. You got to get the queen. That's the key to any kind of insect that has a queen, hierarchical structure. And that oil, it just follows the water down the pathways and it knocks them out. I've had big mounds I may have had to drench twice. Most of them, one drench, gone.
Wow.
Easy button, bro. Easy button. Totally organic, too. Now, understand it is a contact chemical poison to anything with an exoskeleton. So that's ladybugs, lacewings, etc. So this is not an indiscriminate used product, right? This is targeted application. And I promise you, when you drench a fire ant mound, you're killing nothing but fire ants because nothing else lives in there.
That's right.
I know you were an evil little kid like I was. You used to throw shit in there to see what happens. And you know what happens. Right?
All the time, man.
Grasshopper, the whole grasshopper and ant story, there's a flaw in that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
bro,
ants eat grasshoppers.
I remember growing up in Pennsylvania, man, we would go down to the drugstore and buy fireworks. I mean, it was not uncommon. We'd get M80s back when they had real M80s literally off the doggone shelf back there. And, of course, we didn't have fire ants back there, at least not where I was. This guy here, A Million Pumpkins, says, hey, man, mix 1 teaspoon of depleted uranium. Bro, I don't even know if that would even work.
No.
Oh, my goodness.
No, you probably create. Don't do that. You're gonna make flying horrific fire ants from my story. Don't go doing the real learn from science fiction. Don't emulate it.
Hey, don't worry, man. There's some company out there working on that right now for us. There's some chimera. Yeah, it'll be some chimera flying fire ant with my face on it somewhere. Who even knows? You don't even want to know how you get stung, bro. Okay, every time I'm with Jack, it's going to get wild, y'all. Yeah. You know what time it is. Hey, Jack, I got to get running here, and I know you probably got to get going too. Man, thank you so much for your gift of time and also this fire ant, because I know a lot of people out there. That's one of the biggest questions I get when I do these lives, man.
Orange oil, two tablespoons to the gallon. It just kills them. Make sure if you buy it, you're buying actual orange oil, not people sell it pre-prepared, not in concentrate. And that means that you bought a gallon, you get a gallon. That's enough to do like one mound. Medina is the company to buy from. Medina orange oil.
Well, there's a lot of people out there collectively saying thank you. There's going to be a lot more once this goes out as a podcast as well. Jack, where can everybody find you, as if I even need to ask? They should know.
They can go to the survivalpodcast.com, or if that's too many letters for you to type because you're a Gen Z type and you ain't got the attention span to type all that out, you can just go to tspc.co and it will redirect. And everybody listening should do it right now just to see if a domain name can really end with CO instead of COM. Try it. tspc.co. Go there. And then once you go there and you see it works, text your friends and say, go check this out. Don't tell them what it is. Just everybody here, text your friends, tspc.co, and say, check this out.
All right. That's what I'm talking about, y'all. There you go. Straight from the pimp daddy of preparedness himself. If you haven't checked out the Survival Podcast, y'all, you don't know what you're missing. You'll be glad you did. Hey, thanks so much, Jack. And thanks everybody else out there.